So it's late December, and as it's nearing the end of 2021, I decided that tonight was the perfect time to reflect on what has been my card of the year, the Tower. So I decided just to do a bit of journaling with the Tower card, and as I've been working with the Next World Tarot, of course I had the Tower card from that deck out on my table with me. But I also wanted to sort of expand as much as I could, or just sort of open up the dialogue with myself and with this card. And as someone with a large collection, one of the great things about having many decks is the different perspectives and sort of nuances and just slightly different takes that each card, each creator offers for every card in the deck. So I pulled out the Tower card from a few tarot decks that I had lying around. Most of these are actually decks that came from a video I did recently, which was the decks that need to earn their spot in my collection next year. Basically the decks that I haven't been working with enough and that I need to work with more. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to spend a bit of time with a few of those decks as well. So I started by just sort of reflecting on the Tower as I sort of see it, as I'm thinking about it right now, and how I noticed it coming up for me in 2021. And I can't pretend that this time last year I wasn't a little bit apprehensive when I first realised that the Tower was my card of the year. And although 2021 has felt like a Tower year for me in a lot of ways, it's also been in ways that I didn't necessarily expect, or that I might not have normally referred to as Tower moments, maybe. You know, those almost cliche, stereotypical, fiery, earth-shattering, almost terror kind of experiences that we often sort of hear people talk about the Tower card. Those weren't my primary experiences of the card this year. Instead, I think the big theme of 2021 for me, and the way that the Tower card showed up for me, was upheaval. 2021 almost feels like it marked the beginning of a new chapter, or maybe more appropriately, the beginning of an unexpected sequel. The two biggest changes were that Blair and I bought our first ever home, this apartment that I'm in right now, which obviously comes along with a lot of responsibility, a lot of thinking about our future, reassessing our present, and also a massive move. Another big moment for me was with my grandparents, and obviously that is their personal life, so I don't want to speak to it too much, but it really impacted me and it was really confronting. There was a lot to do, a lot to consider, and I essentially sort of helped my grandparents through or like ease into a new part of their lives, which is, older age and all of the challenges that come with that. And then, of course, towards the end of the year, another big upheaval moment came when I realized that it was time for me to leave the job that I've had for several years and find a new one. And the job that I ended up in felt very new and unexpected. Along with the theme of upheaval was a feeling that change or movement was necessary and inevitable. That realization was followed by a struggle, an internal conflict, an uncertainty, fear, frustration, grief, sometimes anger. However, it was when I was able to release, when I was able to let go, when I was able to trust, that things started to fall into place, usually in ways that felt undeniably meant to be. The Tower card in the Next World Tarot is renamed Revolution, and this card depicts a really powerful image of people coming together to protest the capitalist and colonial exploits of land and people, and to say no to harm and devastation, and to protect land and communities. This revolutionary take on the Tower card is a great reminder of the power and importance of the energy of what is usually considered a negative card. I know it's a card that I often have just a little bit of fear in my gut when it comes up for myself in readings, but this deck offers a great reminder that the Tower is not random and chaotic destruction. It's not malicious. It is a deep awareness of what is necessary, what is right, what is essential, and a refusal to accept anything else. A refusal to accept the status quo, to accept the very real harm, restrictions, obligations, trauma that the status quo creates. It refuses to continue participating or upholding that which is harmful. It is a call to defend the sacred, no matter the cost. Sacred being what matters most: land, community, love, life, health, integrity. The sacred for me this year has had a lot to do with my well-being, my integrity, and my future. The Tower asked, or maybe forced, me not to compromise these things anymore. It challenged me to find alternatives, new visions, even if deconstructing my old ideas and saying goodbye to going with the flow and not rocking the boat was hard sometimes. It reminded me that the way things are not the way things always have been or always will be, or even the way things should be. I think the Tower also helped me realize how my silence in certain situations only allowed harm of both me and others to continue. This was especially true in how much ableism I witnessed and experienced this year. The Tower's reminder to defend the sacred was a reminder to me to defend the inherent dignity of every human being, whether they were strangers, customers, co-workers, family members, grandparents, or myself. Next, I took a little look at the Monstarot and the Tower in that deck. Being a cute, quirky, almost fae-inspired sort of deck, it definitely had a very different feeling Tower card to the next world. The keywords in the little white book were change, upheaval, and revelation. And this represented forced change, resulting in a revelation or realization that is impossible to ignore and demands change. I love when the guidebook said, "You can rebuild and you will be stronger for it." That was a great reminder that although there may be losses during the experience of the Tower card, it's not in vain. Next, I had a look at the Cheimonette Tarot, and the keywords in this deck were crisis and destruction. And it said, if starting over seems overwhelming, remember that the starting over will happen on its own, like the self-organizing opportunistic phenomenon it is. A reminder that what comes along with the Tower card is inevitable. And I love that this card almost looks like a battle between good and evil, between what is right and meant to be and what is wrong and cannot be. It looks almost like a destruction of toxicity, like a cleansing. The keywords for the Gentle Tarot included change, upheaval, and release. The guidebook said, embrace change and trust in the opportunity it brings. And when I was able to trust, the process felt necessary, like the universe knew what it was doing. It was when I resisted that it was painful. When I was in a space of trust, it almost felt like what was happening was a breath of fresh air. And when I resisted, it felt like I would drown. So I loved the Gentle Tarot's reminder to trust in the opportunity, rather than just fearing the suffering and the struggle. The Mesquite Tarot's guidebook spoke about reevaluation and change. It said, the inevitability of unraveling is softened when we accept it in all its difficulty, and I loved that. It felt like this card and this depiction allowed for or invited a renewed level of commitment to honesty with self and with others. I liked too how the keyword here was reevaluation. A lot of the other decks have revelation. And what I like about reevaluation is that it feels like the more proactive, participatory element of what we can do in the midst of what sometimes just feels like chaos and loss of control in the Tower. Next, for something a bit different, I wanted to take a look at the Bangtan Tarot. And the keywords here were some of the ones that I picked out and noticed early on in the description was upheaval and instability. I loved the description of a recognition that the structures that have fallen were unstable and built on faulty foundations, and their loss offers clarity, learning, and an opportunity to rebuild from a better starting point. And then by the end of the description, we're talking about a situation that is ultimately hopeful and defiant. And it just made me want to put on replay for the rest of the day. Finally, I took out the Tower from our tarot, which features Anne Boleyn. And the keywords here are disaster, turbulence, unavoidable changes. And something that really struck me here was the discussion of Anne Boleyn's loyalty and how that ultimately had no impact on her fate. The guidebook spoke about events that caused some sort of upheaval that may well be out of your control, and also even pointed out it potentially referencing being burned out at your job. This card really made me think about the fact that we can only respond to any situation as best we can. Many things exist outside our control. And so even though I do feel like the Tower card represents a lot of big and small things that happened to me throughout the year, I think the really pivotal one that has been most impactful for me, or just most symbolic of the Tower, is definitely the experience of, having to resign from my old job and getting a new job. And I have spoken a lot about this whole new job thing. And I think that is because it wasn't just a new job. It was being at my old job and watching the facade crumble, realizing that the position I thought I would have for a long time, where I thought I was valued and respected, where I'd established an identity as a bookseller, and the only response that was acceptable to me on a very integrity-based level was to leave, was to remove myself from that situation. And it was a really big deal. It was hard and it required a lot of grieving and processing. But once I'd accepted that and I stopped struggling and hoping to return to things the way they used to be, things started happening, almost in ways that felt fated, It was hard, but it made me reassess what I will and what I won't accept. what my expectations and boundaries are, what I'm capable of. I have a new awareness now of what is sacred to me and what requires defending. I have a new awareness of what I cannot ever allow to be compromised, what is simply unacceptable to me. Buying our first home and moving into this beautiful apartment felt like the positive but still challenging test tower ride. Upheaval, change, and reevaluation. The job situation, it felt like the full-blown tower situation. It felt like the real deal. But I did get through it, and I know that I'm stronger for it.